right, next up, we have Ohio Secretary of State Frank Larose and his Director of External Affairs, Grant Shaffer, to discuss Ohio's 2020 Trusted Election Information Approach and plans. Team OHIO, take it away.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, thanks for having us on today. We wanted to kind of just start the conversation by having Secretary Larose kind of lay out his vision as we were going into 2020. Obviously, 2019 was our first year in office, and really a lot of the things that we executed last year kind of started and had their roots at that phase.
And as you can see by the monitor behind me, we are at our elections officials conference right now. I know I've heard from a few of you that are jealous that we were able to do that, but we got close to 500 of our elections officials from all over the state in for actually a 3-day conference. We had day 1 was all for the new members to do a lot of training, and then day 2 and 3 has been for everybody. So I just sort of ducked out of the main convention hall to come down and talk to you all, but really looking forward to this. First, I want to just kind of lay the groundwork for what kind of got us energized on this from the very beginning. And this was long before we were ever talking about COVID or a pandemic. I mean, when I first got sworn in early 2019, we were focused at that point on combating disinformation, combating false information. We knew that we faced a very pernicious threat from foreign operators that wanted to try to disorient and confuse voters. We knew that we faced domestic disinformation as well, both the kind that is intentional as well as just the sort of urban legends that go around about elections. I've said time and again that there is just this incredible human capacity for inventing mythology about elections. People just invent all kinds of wild things, and we knew that. And again, long before the pandemic, we knew that. The challenge of a global pandemic puts it into hyperdrive. It makes it even that much more challenging, and all of the things that we faced last year. Of course, many of us have, as chief elections officers, and thanks to the leadership of NASS, with the Trusted Info campaign, we've taken up the mantle that if not us, who, right? Like, we are the chief elections officers in our respective states, and so it will be our responsibility to do our part to make sure that the voters in our respective states have trusted information to work with. And there are a variety of different ways that each of us have tackled that. One thing that I think all of us have tried to do is, instead of chasing each individual rumor and each individual disinformation campaign, what we focused on more broadly is kind of inoculating the public, training them to understand where to go for information. There have been cases, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, where we've decided that something rose to the level where it was generating enough public attention that we had to go proactively at it, sort of do the whack-a-mole routine and try to put it back down. But that really, for us, only happened in, I think, 4 or 5 circumstances that we could think of. Largely, our work was focused on the best antidote to a lie, which is the truth, and just getting accurate information out there through earned media, through our own social media platforms, through some paid media efforts that we had, as well as through various partners around the state. What did we do to prepare? I mean, I was getting around the state quite a bit in person in each of our different media markets. It was a big focus of ours to really basically monthly to get into each of the various television markets here in the state of Ohio. When physical travel became less possible, then we started doing a lot of Zoom. I did a lot of that from my office. And, our goal was clear. I wrote a mission statement on the dry erase board of my chief of staff's office, and it's still up there. And it was, when Ohioans go to bed on election night, they will know and they will believe the results of the 2020 presidential election. I chose those 2 words very intentionally. They would know that unofficial canvass on election night in Ohio, and they would believe it, meaning whether your favorite candidate won or lost, you knew that it was an honest contest and truly the voice of Ohioans speaking. We also know that the efforts of foreign adversaries have really been aimed at not hacking our elections, but hacking the minds of voters. Again, instead of, we know, and you all understand, that it's not really plausible for a foreign adversary to be able to tamper with the tabulation of elections or cause any material change to the way that works. But instead of tampering with the tabulation of elections, what we've seen foreign adversaries engage in is really what we would have called propaganda in a previous generation. It's that idea that you can flood the zone with massive amounts of false information and cause people to believe something or to believe nothing. And that's a lot of what it was about, in my opinion, was creating chaos and confusion. And so we were trying to be that clear voice of reason to combat that. Right?
Yeah, and to kind of follow up on that broad goal that the secretary laid out, it's simple. It's kind of stayed at the front of our mind, but executing that, especially in a year like 2020, from a staff level, is frankly challenging. So we knew that we had to do a few things to be able to address that. We needed to be really proactive and intentional with our communications. For our team, one of the advantages I think we had in that effort is that we did create from the outset this Department of External Affairs, and that helped us build alignment between our regional liaisons who are working directly with the boards of elections in elections administration tasks, but are also helping facilitate travel and scheduling, that are doing outreach on their own. They're kind of like our communications liaisons between the boards of elections in our office a lot. As a bottom-up state, that becomes very, very important. And putting them, that unit next to our communications department allowed us to make sure that when we needed quotes or we needed validators out there, that we had the regionals engaged and that they could help us fill that need, that when we needed to push information out, that it wasn't just a press release, but it was a full court press that the regionals were able to help with. I would say the same.
Let me touch on that for a second, Grant. There's this concept in the military that we call unity of command. It's that idea that everybody's sort of pulling in the same direction because we all report up to the same person, and putting all of our external facing functions under Grant's control as our head of external affairs was very intentional. It was a restructuring that I did of the office. But that way, our digital team, our press secretary, and those that are working with the media, our regional liaisons, our community outreach, minority community, military community, new American immigrant community outreach, all of those outreach efforts, all of those regional liaisons, I think I already mentioned that everybody that communicates external to our office was all under one umbrella and is still under one umbrella and has us speaking with one voice.
Yeah. And for those of you that haven't structured your offices in that way, I would still encourage you to be intentional about starting to build those kind of collaborative relationships. And as the secretary mentioned, make sure that you do have that unity of command. I think as quickly as things were happening on a staff level in 2020, and frankly in the lead up to it, that the winter preceding it, the only reason that we were able to get through it as smoothly as we did was because we had kind of all oars in the water pulling in the same direction. When we take this down kind of to a little bit more tactical level, wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of how we executed that vision. I'm going to share really quickly a PowerPoint that we have here with some of those types of tasks. Let's see if we can get that. There we go. Secretary, do you want to talk a little bit about some of our initiatives?
Yeah, and so what I'd first offer you all the chance to do is to plagiarize any of this that you want. This is the great thing about the American system of elections administration, is that we've got 50 laboratories, each trying different things. And these are some things that we think were successful. Take them to your state. Contact us through NASS. Grab us in Iowa this summer. Email me. It's just frank@ohiosos.gov is my email. And let's get you the materials that we have. And seriously, yank my logo off it and throw your logo on it and roll with it if it's something that you think is interesting. So these are some of the things that we did. County cybersecurity and disinformation briefings. These are for our county boards of elections. Of course, one of the things that we've become known for here in Ohio is really being aggressive on cybersecurity. And that was so that we don't become a propaganda tool for the disinformation operators. Candidly, that's the biggest challenge or the biggest threat is that, for example, you all know if a Board of Elections website was knocked offline by a hacker and replaced with a hacker manifesto, it wouldn't change anybody's votes. It would inconvenience people that are trying to search their voter registration records, or it would inconvenience people that are trying to file their campaign finance reports online or whatever else. But a Board of Elections website wouldn't change anybody's votes, but that would be the public perception. That would be the propaganda value of it. So we were very intentional about protecting our cyber assets so that it didn't become the tool of a disinformation operator, but also making sure that our counties understood this. Some of these terms, disinformation and misinformation, seem a little bit lofty for some folks. When you just break it down for them and go through what this is and what we're up against, then it becomes clear, and also a little bit of a scared straight kind of a thing. Some of you may have seen, and we borrowed this one from Mac Warner in West Virginia. Mac had a presentation that talked about exactly what kind of ugly stuff we're up against with our foreign adversaries. And of course, all on the unclassified side, but grab that and use it. We did, and we took Mac's presentation and adapted it a little bit to Ohio, but to make sure that our boards of elections know who our opponents are and what we're up against. Minority disinformation briefings. One of the things that we saw in Ohio, going back to 2016, was that the most common targets for disinformation were Ohio's minority communities. It was this ugly and pernicious effort to find existing tensions in society and then use those to try to drive a greater wedge and to cause people to self-disenfranchise. And so what I realized is that we needed to leverage trusted voices. That's a term that we use as Secretary of States, but in these minority communities, we needed to leverage trusted voices from within that community. Ministers, business leaders, NAACP leaders, urban league leaders, folks like that. And so we started doing these regionally around the state, in person at first, and then virtually once COVID came around. And what we did was really accomplish several things. First of all, help them understand what is disinformation, how do you recognize it, how do you combat it? Because the best antidote to a lie is the truth, and lots of it. So we helped kind of deputize these guys to recognize disinformation and report it to us. And we had a success story there. When there was an ugly and I would argue highly racist robocall that went out in Northern Ohio that was telling minority communities not to vote absentee because it was going to lead to an arrest warrant or it's going to lead to a credit agency coming after them to get money. We were able to identify that within minutes of that robocall going out and turn it over to federal law enforcement. It happened also across the border in Michigan. And as a result, these bad guys are going to face justice. But it was because we had people that grabbed that recording and they knew about it and they knew who to call and they reported it immediately to us. And we were able to get it in the hands of law enforcement. I know that the Michigan team did as well. But then also they were equipped to push back on that, to get accurate information out through their channels. Myth versus fact work on social media. As you all know, this can be funny to us as elections officials. Some of the bizarre things people believe that are just not based anywhere in reality. We did a series where we did like Fact Friday or something like that, where once a week we were doing a social media post with a myth and a fact. Like, here's a myth, here's a fact. There you go. See rumor and reality right there. What was also great is when we got those kind of trending and when others were sharing them, because again, it's a useful piece of information. We even had journalists that were sharing that. Certainly our boards of elections were helping to amplify that out there. So that's another thing. Quick social media videos on elections processes. We did a number of these. One, to understand the route of an absentee ballot. I loved this one because, again, a lot of people have all of these ideas in their head. We did one from the viewpoint of the ballot. Imagine these videos that you see where it's like from a dog's view. Well, we did it from the ballot's view. So you see the ballot going into a mailbox and coming out of a mailbox and going through. And so it explained to people all along the way how an absentee ballot is handled. And again, that's something I'd love to share with you guys if you're interested, and you can take and use that as inspiration for a video in your own state. But we also did some quick impromptu things where there were, and that gets into this next one, quick social rapid response rather. When there were a few things that came up where somebody was claiming something false on social media, we would evaluate whether it had actually sort of caught fire or not. But if it had grown to the level of needing a response, we got these videos out there real quick. A few examples were there was somebody on social media. We never were able to substantiate whether they're a real student or not, but they were claiming that they're a student at Ohio State University and that they're a resident assistant at a dorm. And they said they work in the mailroom, and they said they know who the Democratic students are and who the Republican students are. And when a ballot comes in for somebody that they think is going to vote for Trump, they throw it away. Well, we were able to that started to catch on and get attention and get some media attention. So we got in touch with OSU, and they were able to validate that that's not how their mail is handled there. And then I did a video that said, hey, listen, you may think that's funny, but what you're talking about is a felony, and we'll catch you. And so we were able to get the word out there to people that that's not something that they should be worried about. There were a variety of other examples as well where we did that. Grant?
Yeah. So many of these tactics that we employed were about both building our credibility, building the Secretary's credibility as the trusted source, and also just providing ourselves with the infrastructure that we would need for this rapid response type stuff. We know that it's much less effective to be the only people out there pushing a message. And so, having our minority partners engaged in this, having our county parties, and certainly in Ohio, having the county boards of elections engaged in messaging things too, helped both amplify our message, but also provided us with a lot greater credibility. And that's something that took some time. It takes a lot of repetition to build, but it's something that's very doable and also very, very beneficial when you need it.
There's one more I wanted to share that's not on here. This is one that I think that you all should look at in your home state. And our previous panelists got me thinking about this. Connecting with members of the media. All of you through NASS have probably heard some of these stories where some of our foreign adversaries that are engaging in disinformation, and we can expect that I'm sure this kind of thing will continue, where they really hit the gold mine, where they really get the award for disinformation person of the year or whatever, is when they get something to cross over from social media into earned media, actual, credentialed journalism. And so we did a series called Elections 101 for members of the press. We hosted this at the boards of elections. I'll be honest that my press secretary, when I first came up with this idea, he said, nobody's going to attend that. And if they do, they're going to stay for a half hour and then they're going to get bored and they're going to leave. I was right, though, when we realized that these reporters really were interested. They stayed for like 2.5 hours, and we took them all through the board of elections. We did this regional all over the state, and we did it chronological. So we showed them, again, what happens along the way. Here's the bottom line to it. These reporters, as a result, were better prepared to recognize disinformation and not be a victim of disinformation themselves. But they were also better equipped to report on elections in general, because all the journalists I know care deeply about getting the information right, but they're not elections experts. They've never even been behind the counter at the Board of Elections in some cases. And so this better equipped them to know the right lingo, to know the facts, to be able to call BS when something crosses their desk that just doesn't sound believable. And then also to build relationships between these journalists and their local Board of Elections that really did pay dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. And our situation is going to be slightly different than some of the other states. But I think this kind of process is valuable for any state, regardless of your resource or your kind of situation. We've all, if you do a quick SWOT analysis, we've all have the strength of being kind of the key voice for elections in our state, as the secretary said. One of the weaknesses that we deal with is that it's easy for our megaphone to be drowned out by other voices, either partisan voices or just folks outside interest groups that have a lot more money and sometimes have a message that is a little bit better clickbait. When we look at the opportunities that we have, we had a public that was very hungry for information in 2020, that was very engaged in the elections. We were able to leverage that in a big way, and that was one of the kind of major opportunities that helped us get through 2020. So when we look at some of the other kind of tasks that we were able to undertake in 2020, we really kind of tried to engage from a place of opportunities and dealing with our strengths. We created social media toolkits that we could push out to partners around the state, some of whom, frankly, have been critical in the past, but who had an interest, that shared our interest in making sure that voters were informed and educated and were able to make their voices heard despite some challenging circumstances. Those were a set of graphics that you can basically kind of tweak for a lot of different audiences. It's not the simplest thing to put together, but it's very doable. And it's also something that you can kind of recycle in the future. Because we had so many different types of outreach components within external affairs, we were able to come up with some other really great partnerships. Every Vote Counts that we did with our breweries through the Craft Beer Association. I think Kentucky did something similar afterwards. Just, making sure that brewers were helping us out too. If you went into a bar, or you ordered a 6-pack or picked a 6-pack up at your grocery store, that there was some elections information there.
Over 75 craft brewers around Ohio throughout the whole summer were producing beers in cans and bottles with those logos on them that had information about how to become registered to vote. And the added benefit was it gave me an excuse to travel around to a lot of craft brewers in Ohio.
Yeah, there was earned media potential. There was voter education potential. Frankly, one of the things that we did with this is, okay, if you visit voteohio.gov to register to vote, we're also going to ask you if you can serve as a poll worker, because we know there are big needs there. So we were able to kind of take it one step further as people engaged. We did the same thing basically at barbershops and salons, knowing that that is kind of a key place that people are visiting, even during a pandemic, and that, political conversations are happening there. If you're going to talk about, who you want to vote for president, or who you don't like, we wanted to make sure that there were materials there that would help engage you in our process, educate you, allow you to register to vote, and then again, kind of push you to serve as a poll worker. In creating those different points of engagements, like I said, they increased our credibility with the media and with the public, because we were perceived as being out there to educate, but they also helped us kind of define that universe. And once we could engage someone, to kind of continuously kind of build the audience and make sure that they were being educated. We did a lot of things with partners like drive-through registration drives, reaching out to veterans, people that have served the country, and asking them to, step up again. A second call to duty is what we called it, and serve as poll workers. All of these types of avenues provided us with good opportunities to educate voters and make sure that we were kind of dealing with the situation as it arose with the pandemic, but also, furthering the secretary as kind of the trusted voice in Ohio and the place to go for good election information. Going forward, wanted to talk a little bit about, 2020 was quite the year, probably the most challenging year to do an election in decades, at least, maybe ever. And it provided a good stress test for us. We kind of learned where we were strong, where we were weak. The pressure to deliver a good election for the people of Ohio also provided us with a lot of opportunities going forward to kind of repurpose some of the things that we've learned, some of the materials that we've created, and to borrow from other states as well. As the secretary mentioned, a lot of this stuff is not stuff that we need to recreate completely on our own. Stuff that we can kind of repurpose going forward. So Frank, do you want to talk a little bit about just some of the lessons learned and kind of what we want to focus on going forward?
Yeah, so the things you've got up here, start early, and that's something that I think proved useful to us. Find partners out there. There are a lot of others that care about this and that want to help you amplify your message, whether it's from the voting rights community, from think about the members of your state legislature. And some of you may think, oh my gosh, they can be difficult to work with sometimes, but each of them represent a group of constituents, and they want to get information that's accurate out to their constituents as well. So messaging your state legislators. We do a weekly newsletter out to every member of our state legislature. And some of them use it and amplify our stuff on social media. Others don't. But it's just another method of trying to get it out there, get everybody falling in the same direction. And then it's important to talk about your successes. This slide that you see here tells the story of how Ohio had what we've called our most successful election in history. That's not hyperbole. By every metric you can look at, the 2020 election in Ohio was the most successful election we've ever had in terms of turnout, with record numbers, absolutely record-shattering numbers of turnout as far as raw number and percent, Every one of our counties had a record-breaking turnout, but even things like the number of poll workers. We had 56,000 poll workers answer the call to duty in Ohio. That's a record we've never seen. We had a record low number of provisional ballots. We're really proud of that. We had a record low number of absentee ballots rejected for voter mistakes, and that's counterintuitive when you think that we had a doubling in the number of people doing it. So we had a lot of rookies, right? People voting absentee for the first time, but as a result of some of the work we did, we were able to cut the rejection rate in half. So it's important to talk about your successes as well. And then, going forward, there's a couple of things that I think are worth thinking about. Again, here at our elections officials conference, I have been asking our boards of elections to get out there now that we're starting to be able to do this again and do grassroots communication. Again, some multi-million-dollar program or whatever else is not necessarily the answer. We have in Ohio 88 boards of elections, each one with a bipartisan team. I'm telling them to get a fair booth at the county fair this summer. Let people go set up a voting machine at the fair and let people come and vote on their favorite deep fried whatever. And when they do, they're going to come up and somebody's going to say, hey, is this the voting machine with the secret algorithm from Venezuela or whatever? And instead of laughing at that person, stop and actually engage with them. Talk to them about why that's not possible, why that's not true. Give them a one-pager, and our office is producing a one-pager they can pass out that talks about the security of our systems in Ohio. I've told our boards of elections to get out there to the Rotary Club, send your Democratic director and your Republican deputy director or vice versa, and have them both speak at the local Rotary Club about elections integrity and election security and accessibility. Get into the schools this fall. We do mock elections in schools where we'll go, I can't do this everywhere because it's labor intensive, but we'll go into the school and run their, when they vote for student class president, or they vote for the theme for the homecoming dance. Instead of voting by sticking an index card in a shoebox, we can do it with real voting machines and actually educate young people about the process and take some of the intimidation away from them. The fact is, in 2021, normally, and these are not normal times, normally people wouldn't be talking about what we do. Normally in a year like this, a year ending in one, people wouldn't be talking about post-election audits. They wouldn't be talking about logic and accuracy testing and voting machine security and whatever. Well, they're talking about those things not necessarily for the right reasons, in cases for the wrong reasons, but they're talking about them. So let's capitalize on this opportunity to do some civics education and help people understand what we know to be true. And that is that elections, at least in Ohio, and I think in your states as well, are accessible and secure and trustworthy.
And taking this down one layer to the staff level, there's a lot of content that you can engage in, and I know resources are always limited. My advice to each of you would be, don't reinvent the wheel. We created some good stuff in 2020. You'll see it again in 2021. I bet you'll see it again in 2022 in some fashion. So we'll take this year to kind of refresh, to take what we did and build calendars so that we can have better predictability in a post-pandemic world on when we want to kind of use different pieces of content, when we want to start different initiatives, et cetera, like our PSA timing, all those types of things, to just build better predictability and make it a little bit easier for our staffs to handle a lot of these tasks. We benefited a whole lot from a lot of resources that we received from you as states, from the association, CISA, as the secretary mentioned. The basis for our misinformation stuff came from Mac Warner and from CISA. So there's a lot of things there that we can kind of repurpose. And also, where you do have designers, we've had a lot of success with just creating templates that we can swap out some pictures, swap out some text, and kind of create like a brand or a mini brand around different social media.
And honestly, and I know that secretaries' offices are great and small and reflect the diversity of our states, but if you have the ability to hire a graphic designer, please really consider doing that. The ability to communicate graphically through a GIF or a video or a graphic is so much better. And listen, I love the written word, but the fact is a lot of people just don't absorb that the way they absorb graphics and videos and GIFs and animations. And so if you have the ability to hire a graphic designer, do it. If you don't, try to partner with your local art college or your local graphic design college and see if they've got an intern. You may find that they care about this mission of running elections, and you may find some young people that are willing to do this in order to give themselves some credibility in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have that, learn to use Canva. A lot of this stuff you can do, which actually is a great segue to my final point. Let Bartlett be Bartlett is a line from The West Wing, and it's kind of one of those evergreen things in politics. It applies to a lot of different areas. For us, one of the big lessons was to figure out and to suit our boss's strengths. And one of the things that meant for us is graphics are great, and we did some really cool stuff because we had the resources to do it. But we could also set aside 30 minutes of the secretary's schedule and knock out 4 or 5 videos, just kind of really candid, straight to camera type stuff to address a lot of different topics. And that was very easy. At other times, it was literally the secretary with his iPhone just recording a selfie video, reacting to something that is kind of a topic of the day or something that we really needed to dive into. If your secretary is kind of that person that can speak really quickly off the cuff, powerful tool. If not, there's a lot of different kind of ways that we can kind of suit our secretary's strength. If you're on the road, if you have someone that likes to travel, lots of opportunities for earned media and to build relationships and coalitions through that. And I would just say the final piece of advice that I would have for you is don't be afraid of substance, especially in a time like this where the general public and the press is absolutely interested in elections administration in a way that I haven't seen for the last decade. It's a good time to get into the nuts and bolts of elections. We have found reporters to be very, very receptive to those types of things. We found a lot of earned media potential in that.
Time for questions?
I think it's time for questions.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys want to put your questions into the chat for the Secretary and Grant, I can read those off. And as you go ahead and type in, I just want to say thank you to Secretary Larose for this wonderful presentation. And Grant, I've worked with Grant in a previous life before, and so I always try to pick on him when I can. So thanks for doing this, guys. So do we have any questions or any secretaries that want to unmute themselves and tackle something? Don't be shy. Let's see.
Well, and let me reiterate too, any of these materials that we've mentioned are open source as far as I'm concerned. We'll send it to you. We'll FTP a big packet of stuff, and you can pick what you want for your state, videos, graphics, animations, all of that.
We'd appreciate if you would do the same for us when we have stuff that we want to kind of borrow from you as well.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We have one from Jordan. What advice do you have on how to draw attention to a mock election being held at a festival or fair? How do you get people to participate?
Yeah, so this is one that I've talked about a lot so let's use a county fair, for example. You're going to have vendors there selling all kinds of deep fried stuff. And so if you run a mock election at your booth where people can vote on their favorite food at the fair, then every vendor there is going to start telling people, vote for my, thing. Go over to the Board of Elections booth and vote for my deep fried Twinkies or whatever the thing may be. Your fairgrounds may be willing to work with you, or say you do vote for the best 4-H club at the fair or the best livestock exhibit or whatever else. Now you've got all the kids that are telling people, go over to that thing and vote for my livestock exhibit or whatever else. So that's just one example. It's always something lighthearted and fun. Your favorite ride, your favorite band, the different bands that play at fairs and festivals.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I think we're having some technical difficulties with the internet, maybe on Secretary Larose's end. Let's see. Can everybody? Okay, you can hear me just fine. All right. So we thank Secretary Larose and Grant for their time. We would really love to continue the Q&A with them, but if we could, we'll move on to Secretary Hobbs and Murphy in Arizona to talk through their trusted info strategy for 2020. Again, another practitioner principle approach. So if we could go ahead and pass the presenter ball over to Murphy. Stacy, that'd be really great. Thank you.
I think Secretary Hobbs is gonna kick us off.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. We're very excited to be a part of this today. So I'll just be brief and then kick it over to Murphy. Going into the 2020 election cycle, we knew that misinformation, disinformation posed the biggest threat, and ensuring that voters had access to accurate election information was a top priority from the start. And we knew that this would be a challenge. But at the beginning of the year, when we were starting to prepare, we didn't know that a once in a lifetime global pandemic would further complicate matters, as I'm sure all of you felt as well. Early on, we decided that Arizona voters were not going to have to choose between exercising their freedom to vote and protecting their health. And the key to making this happen was ensuring that people knew where and how to get reliable information and who they could trust to provide it. This was largely about making sure voters knew their options so that they could participate in a manner that was most meaningful, but also safest for them. At the Secretary of State's office, we knew that this was possible for several reasons. First of all, Arizona has a robust and secure vote by mail system in place that most voters already used. And so the infrastructure was already there. And secondly, my team and I spent the first year of this administration maintaining and in some cases, many cases, repairing relationships with election officials, advocacy groups, and other stakeholders across the state to make sure that we are heading into 2020 on the same page in terms of ensuring efficiently run elections and access to voting for our voters. We relied on these relationships to identify, address, and respond to challenges. And we got feedback from various sources, including from our nationally recognized Voter Outreach Advisory Council, from tribal leadership and election officials and workers. All of that feedback reinforced that getting voters access to information, to accurate information about the elections would be the most vital thing in terms of helping them stay safe and exercise their freedom to vote. And the Trusted Info 2020 campaign was a huge part of that effort. So with those words, I just want to hand it off to Murphy Hebert, and just I know I'm biased, but she is definitely the best comms person in the business, and we're really lucky to have her on our team here at the Arizona Secretary of State's office. So thanks again so much for having us be a part of this.
I paid her to say that, so thank you. So I'm Murphy Hebert. I'm the communications director for Secretary Hobbs's office, and I have just some quick slides that I'd love to run through to show you some examples of the way that we were able to implement our Trusted Info campaign. So I'm just going to take a second there's Baby Yoda. Okay. Can y'all see my screen? Okay, perfect. So as the secretary laid out for us, we knew that we had two main objectives. One was to increase voter access to trusted information, and the second was to combat the pervasive misinformation and disinformation that was being pushed long before the general election, there has been sort of, as you all know, like a wave of misinformation that has been sweeping across our elections for the last probably 2 cycles in earnest. And so we knew that that was going to be a big part of what we needed to work on. And so we kind of took a first things first approach in order to make sure that we had the information that was accurate and available. We could identify people who were trusted sources of information and could provide information about the process and how to participate. We kind of centralized that. I remember back in, I don't know, I think we had been on the job for like 3 days when we had to go to our first NASS committee or our first NASS conference. We didn't even have business cards. And I remember having a conversation during one of the comms directors breakout sessions about how it would be really great if we had a way to brand election information that made it easily recognizable as an official source. And of course, there are all sorts of ways that you can counterfeit that, but the thing that kept coming to mind was when I was a kid, my grandfather was a dentist, and he always taught me to look for the ADA stamp on all of the toothpaste and toothbrushes and things, just to make sure that it was ADA approved. And so we were talking about making something that was like election official approved. And lo and behold, the genius Maria, a few months later, rolls out this trusted info campaign with amazing products. I still want a pair of socks. It really spoke to the need that we had recognized. And so we were able to incorporate that into a lot of what we did. But first, we needed to make sure that our ducks were in a row. And so we did that. I hope this link works. It does. Okay, good. So as the Secretary of State's office, we have a very large, cumbersome, government-y website that speaks to all of the things that our agency does. And what we needed to do was make a quick access point for voters that was catchy, that we could use in all of our print and paid advertising to make sure that we were directing folks to a singular place where they knew that they could find not only information about the election, but also information about who could get them more trusted information. And so we did sort of a cross branding between our Arizona.vote website and our regular government website, and threw in a nice trusted info call out there as well to sort of help support that branding. We also did our own version of the CISA's rumor control page that I will show you. You may note that our graphic, very similar to Ohio's, has to do with Sharpies. We're the home of Sharpie Gate. Sharpies did not, in Arizona, as anywhere else, did not impact the processing of the ballots in Arizona, and we just needed to make sure that people knew that. We also were able to use this as a way to respond to a lot of the questions that we were seeing pop up on social media in real time. And we blatantly stole from CISA and are so excited that that rumor control page is still up and active because it continues to be a resource. So then, along with our objectives, we had some tangible goals. One was to increase poll worker recruitment. Another was the promotion of elected officials as trusted sources of information. And then it's listed third, it's really the top one. It was increasing voter participation. And so just to show you some of the things that we were able to produce as part of our Trusted Info campaign, because they were all interconnected. So we did a really good job of recruiting poll workers. People in Arizona did a really good job of showing up as poll workers. We started promoting both to the general population and to state employees, and had, like, if you look at Maricopa's numbers, I mean, that is definitely the population base in Arizona, but that's almost 16,000 people who wanted to be poll workers. That warms my cold, dark heart. We did this through a number of ways, again, that were bolstered by the Trusted Info campaign. We had a recruitment page. We had specific recruitment materials that were also co-branded with Trusted Info. And we paid a lot to promote. This was a large portion of our advertising budget, was making sure that we got this message out to folks. And it was pretty effective. And again, this was all cross-branded with the Trusted Info 2020 campaign. Because we are in research and development, or rip off and repeat, I went ahead and stole Maria's Trusted Sources or Trusted Info campaign video, but it doesn't have sound, but it's still pretty cute and good job with it. And so I thought I'd share it. We could take a video break. Like how excited that guy is. Just so everyone knows, there is a musical background. I just couldn't get it to share on the screen. And it was quite jazzy, so it helps set the stage. So what we did was really took notes from this campaign and applied it across a bunch of our own platforms. So we sort of took the Trusted Info branding and made it our own. We incorporated elements of it into almost every piece of informational material that we put out. And I showed you this on our website. We made sure to identify all of the county and local election officials as trusted sources of information, because we wanted to make sure people knew who to go to in their local jurisdictions to get trusted information. And for our goal of increased participation, this is something that I am ecstatic about. We had historic turnout, and that was despite a pandemic, that was despite prolific misinformation. This also warms my cold, dark heart that there are so many people who are interested in making their voices heard and who did trust the system enough to participate. And so we knew we were working with a really active baseline, and we wanted to make sure that we are able to maintain that confidence. And the way that we do that is by really prioritizing meeting people where they are, and finding out, not just telling them who the trusted sources of information are, but listening to them to determine who in their communities are trusted folks, and then helping those folks become surrogates for that trusted information. So as Secretary Huff said, we spent a lot of time building and repairing relationships, and learning exactly what it was our office could do to be helpful, and then having really frank conversations about what is feasible and what is not feasible, especially in the timeline that we were working under. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but our secretary does not shy away from difficult conversations or or hard questions. So this skill was brought to full force in a lot of the conversations that we were having with folks who are members of the indigenous communities in Arizona. We have 22 federally recognized tribes, and many of them have, for various reasons, have very low participation in elections. And that was something that we sort of took on as a massive project that we wanted to start to turn. We needed to turn that ship around. And so I wanted to talk about some of the things that we learned in those conversations with those trusted community sources. We learned that we needed to communicate in a manner that spoke to the communities that we were trying to reach. So we hired a Native artist to help us develop pieces of election-related information that would speak to Indigenous communities. These pieces were highly stylized. They were targeted with information that that was necessary for the folks to participate in from their positions in Indigenous communities. And also we cross-promoted all of this with the Trusted Info 2020 campaign. So the idea here was not just trust us, don't worry, we're the government, we're here to help, but also trust the folks in your community. So like if there was a community leader or person who had already developed more trust within the community, we wanted them to be able to utilize these graphics and these messages as surrogates for our office. I won't be able to play this because you won't be able to hear sound, but we also did a series of ads in Dene, which is the Navajo spoken language. Dene does not have it is an oral language. There's not a written, I mean, they figured out how to write it, but it doesn't have an official written language. So we made sure to produce materials that were auditory and that had and that were in the Dene language. So I'm sorry you can't listen to it because it sounds really cool. This is just some more of the materials that we developed. We did a series of AZ Vote Safe guides for various communities throughout the state with community-specific recommendations to help community leaders communicate about how the folks in their communities could best overcome the unique challenges and obstacles to voting and voting safely in the elections. So we did a lot of these guides, and many of them are available on our tools and resources page, along with lots of the videos that we created within the Trusted Info campaign. So all of our materials we made available online. The idea here was to make sure that election officials and community leaders had access to all of the materials that we were producing. So we promoted this specific tab of Arizona.vote pretty heavily to our colleagues because, as it's been said previously, please share. If any of these are useful to any of the folks on this call right now, you are welcome to it. That's why we put it on the interwebs. Yeah, so the takeaways that I wanted to share based on this presentation are: one, the Trusted Info campaign was woven into every aspect of our communications plan from the start. It was an idea that helped us feel empowered, and having the support of NASS and being part of a national movement to call attention to the leaders and the defenders of our democracy was incredibly helpful. And I think we saw that pay off in the participation numbers. So we are open for questions.
Thank you so much, Murphy and Secretary Hobbs. So if anyone has any questions, please put them into the chat and we'll read them out loud. I will say by far and away, Arizona ran with the Trusted Info 2020 message, and we were so excited every time we saw a post come out from them. They really did a great job, and I'm so excited that they were able to make it their own. And it's just every time I was just so excited. I can't understate that enough. And so I was really happy that we were doing this webinar so we could feature their work. So again, get those questions in. Otherwise, I'll start picking on people. And secretaries, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and dive in. See. So I know there was a question last time that we didn't get a chance to, and I think it also applies to you folks. So you did a lot of videos, and this state did as well. They had a hard time gauging which would be successful. Some retweeted well, others only got a couple likes. What did you think was the key for some of your videos, and how you went about that?
Money. That's the short answer, right? Like, we are constantly playing a game against the algorithms of all of the social media platforms. And so really our paid advertising was by far the most effective way of doing that. The other, if you're not able to produce a paid campaign, the advice that I would give you is make sure that there are folks in your videos who are reflective of the communities that you're trying to reach. People love to see themselves in videos, and they also like to see sort of what the back end of things look like. So, we did one day where we had Secretary Hobbs fill out her early ballot and walk it to her mailbox, and we did a little video on that, and that performed really well because you kind of got to see her home and where her mailbox is. It just felt a little more personal, and I think those things play really well and help people feel like they can trust you. Some people felt like they could trust her maybe too much at her house.
Well, and I just want to jump in on here. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I need to say that the private grants that were available for voter education were absolutely essential in our strategy. And we talk all the time about how elections are underfunded, and we all know that here. But not only did the federal government not come up with enough dollars, we all made it through anyway, but our state blocked those federal dollars from getting to our office. The state legislature did. And so we were kind of reliant on the governor using his discretionary funds to fund that, but they continued to block the pieces that we were going to utilize for public education. So without those private grants, we would not have been this successful. And so now obviously there's efforts across the country to block private dollars from helping with election administration. I understand some of the concerns, but we have got to fund our elections. And I'm not saying anything that you all don't know here, but just wanted to throw that out there.
So there's a couple questions in the chat now, so that's exciting. Are the videos for Arizona on your website? I sent a message to Murphy to put a link to the chat, and she did, crushing it. So
with my spider fingers.
We're all our own GIF on these virtual platforms.
It's true.
So the next question, any comments from Ohio or Arizona or other states about their budgeting for pre-election versus post-election communication? Was there not enough left in the tank, so to speak, for the need in the post-election period?
I would love to talk about this because this was a really exciting moment for this communications director was when we got those private dollars that Secretary Haas was talking about. I realized that we would have enough money to continue to do public education following the election, following election night. And that was the first time. My background is I worked at the county recorder's office in Maricopa County, and we had a significant budget for public outreach and really just weren't able to make it last beyond election day. And this was the first time that we had substantial investment in post-election information and education, and it made a huge difference. I think it really should be, man, it really should be wrapped into the whole communication strategy for elections, because especially as people have noted on this webinar, there is this sort of unseen, like this new interest in the nitty-gritty details that has not been seen from the public before, and having that information available to answer those questions quickly and relevantly made a huge difference.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the post-election is a new wild, wild west. So the next question from our fearless leader, Leslie Reynolds, were most of your materials developed in-house?
Ours were about half and half.
And Murphy, could you talk, or Secretary Hobbs, could you talk about your communications team structure? I know everyone does it a little bit different. Like I'm a solo warrior. I know that you also have a press secretary or equivalent. So can you just talk through that and like how you guys go about developing products?
Sure. So we during the election cycle, I was still the communications director. And we have a deputy communications director, Sophia Solis. We also have an outreach coordinator, Donovan, who is actually the voice of the in the Danae video or radio ad that I wanted to share. We hired a person, like a temporary employee, someone who I had worked with previously and knew had some communication background to help us sort of filter through the onslaught of emails and threats and texts and tweets that were, lobbed at our office. And then we had an intern. So it was a fairly small team. Since then, we've hired a graphic designer. I agree with what the folks from Ohio said. If you can bring it in an in-house graphics designer, it makes a huge difference. Oftentimes Sophia played graphics designer, and sometimes I did too. And you can really tell the difference between the graphics that she created and I created, because she's much better at it than I am. And then also you can really tell in our products when we hired on a professional graphics designer. It did make a huge difference. And then outside of that, we worked with, once we had that money allocated, we hired a PR firm to help us develop and to develop the paid campaigns, and then also to place the paid campaigns. Because that was something I did on my own once when I was in Maricopa, and it was terrible. It really does take a full-time job managing all those paid ads.
Definitely. It's its own burden.
It really is. Yeah, it's its own beast. It was so nice to be able to call someone who I trusted to be like, hey, they ran the wrong ad. Can you track it down and fix it? And then know that it would be fixed. That was really helpful.
So Tiffany from Alaska asked, who did you hire to produce your videos?
It's a firm called Lavage, and they're local in Arizona. I am happy to drop a link to their website in the page because I pretty much adore them.
They were so great to work with, and they did our whole campaign really, and they're helping to update our website now. And they also previously had worked with the governor's office on the census outreach campaign.
And I know Katie in Kansas said they use Animaker for their video creation. And so everybody does things a little bit differently. Some people can do it in-house, others hire out. So it's really, if you come to the NASS Summer Conference in Des Moines, we'll have a communication staff roundtable where we can all talk through the different, things that we use and just have our own little heart to heart about the different products or experiences. So that's a little plug for the summer conference. And a few others are already in the chat. Let's see. Another question from Jordan. When you began the process of developing communications to targeted communities, particularly Indigenous or other communities of color, how did you begin? How did you get a foot in the door in the sense of identifying your first surrogates? And how would you advise proceeding further with that specific community?
So much of that was Secretary Hobbs just in developing relationships.
Yeah, I started really focusing on that aspect during my campaign for this office and reached out to as many tribal communities as would have me come and talk to them and more really listen to them. I wanted to learn about the barriers that they experienced related to voting and ballot access, and so that we could get to work immediately in the office and start addressing them. And it helped lay the foundation for having already started building those relationships. I made it a priority to have a tribal liaison in our office, which, 22 recognized tribes, that was essential. And so really started laying the foundation before I got there. And that was really critical. Our tribal liaison does identify as Navajo. That was critical as well. And then we also had, what was Jason's position? Was he one of the fellows?
He was a fellow, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's now full-time with our office.
Yeah. And he also identifies as Native American, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think having people that represent the communities is also really critical.
I'll go ahead and just take the moderator privilege. You guys had an onslaught of earned media through national interviews. So taking a step back, is there anything that you would do differently or you would recommend for your peers across the states when it comes to fielding those national inquiries and then not only fielding them, but actually executing on them?
We didn't sleep much. I have to brag about Secretary Hobbs in this. We decided pretty early on that in the days from election day forward, her job was to make sure that people knew that that the count was going well and that it was accurate. And she really dedicated herself to, we were up doing interviews at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes and doing interviews all day until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, just because that was our job. And I think that made a difference, and I wouldn't handle it any other way. I also think that the deputy in our office is super personable. I try to be friendly. That actually goes a really long way. Just being open and being hey, I'm really tired right now, but give me a minute and I'll try to track that down. Slow your roll. I got you. And then actually following up on it was really what helped us develop some really strong relationships with the national media. And then Secretary Hobbs is just a badass, so that helps.
Well, and I would say those relationships have definitely paid off because, as you know, the election aftermath is continuing in Arizona, and having the opportunity to keep a spotlight on the damage that this kind of post-election audit, Arizona-style audit, will do has been really helpful, I think, in helping other states, work ahead of the game to try to stop it. And so having that, the being accessible during the election and right immediately following the election has been really helpful as this saga continues in Arizona.
Yeah, those relationships have definitely carried over.
Well, we still have about 8 minutes left. If you have any questions for Arizona, this is your time to shine. Secretary Hobbs or Murphy, is there anything, based off these questions or just anything else you'd like to add that we didn't cover regarding trusted info or any tips or tricks you'd like to convey?
I'll just say I talk to different civically oriented groups all the time, and they want to know like what can we do to help with this misinformation. And I keep pointing them to Arizona.vote. I keep telling them these resources are still available. You can go there to debunk some of the myths that are out there and to share that with others. And we're going to continue updating that site as we head into the next election and people are used to now going there as their trusted source. I think having that information accessible so that when you're saying go to trusted sources, people are able to actually do that. And so that was a really great resource for us and continues to be. And I also think, some of the lessons learned we're already incorporating into our outreach plans for the next election. Some of the information that maybe we should have focused a little bit more on because people seemed very confused about this are definitely things we're incorporating as we plan for 2022.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. Like I said, you have been champs in the Trusted Info 2020 battle, and we can't thank you enough for presenting today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you guys have any questions, I'm not sure if Murphy wants to provide her email in the chat for Arizona specifically. That'd be really great, and we appreciate y'all. Well, this was an excellent final webinar for our spring webinar series. We appreciate the Democracy Fund for making this happen. Again, we'll put this recording on the NASS website within about 48 hours under our webinars tab. We also have plans to send it to the participants listed email in their registration after we've posted it. So look out for that email from either Stacy or I. And thank you again for tuning in for a whole 2 hours. We appreciate your attention span, and to the presenters for joining us today. I know you have busy schedules. So if you have any questions for NASS, my email is mbenson@sso.org. We appreciate you guys and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.